Okay, so we spoke a bit about the holiday of Purim, how it's greater than time and outside of time, and I wanted to move to something very specific in terms of the holiday, and that is a woman's obligation to the holiday. And what I want to do is I want to learn together. These are things that you already know, a few core terms in reference to women and observance and women and Jewish law. And these are important things that people know and are reminded of. And in the context of Purim, they're very important as well. So I want to learn 4 or 5 core principles today. Okay. Principle number one is that we say that women are not chayavot, women are not obligated to positive commandments that are time specific. So a woman has greater responsibilities. The woman is building the home, she's building the family. And on the one hand, on the other hand, because the woman is the pinnacle of creation, there's less needed for the woman's refinement than the man's. And therefore, if there's a conflict between a woman's core responsibility of building the home and the mitzvah that takes place at this specific time, we say that the woman is exempt from doing that mitzvah. And what would be an example? An example would be sitting in the sukkah or sleeping in the sukkah, right? Or taking a lulav on Sukkot. Women don't have these obligations because these particular obligations are specifically time bound. And the general rule is that even though the mitzvah comes from the Torah, the rabbis came along later and said, but wait a minute, certain things can't really work. And therefore, they put this dismissal mechanism for the women on certain halachot. Okay? On the other hand, many halachot, even though they're time specific, women still have to do them. For example, praying has a beginning time and an end time, right? The shacharit prayer, right? As you all know, has a beginning and an end time. But women are still obligated to pray at least once a day, preferably twice, but at least once a day. Isn't that a time-bound mitzvah? It is. It's rabbinic. And the rabbis say, you know what, even though this is time-bound, find the time because this is super important. So the rabbis who exempted the women from certain things reserved the right to say, we're going to exempt you from X, but not from Y. We're going to let you off on X, but not Y. So let's take a few other time-specific mitzvot. The Seder, the Pesach Seder, right? The reading the Haggadah, drinking the 4 cups of wine, eating all that matzah, those are specific to that night, to the night of the 14th, 15th, right? They're specific to those nights. But despite that, women are obligated to do those things. Jumping back to a rabbinic mitzvah like Chanukah, Chanukah also is very specific. We light the first night's candles on the first night. And we have another separate mitzvah to light candles on the second night, and on and on. So we have this interesting thing. We have tons of mitzvot. We have an overarching principle that women are on a different level than men to begin with, need less refinement that a mitzvah brings on, and that the women have a greater responsibility, the responsibility to their home and children. Despite that, women are still obligated in many of the mitzvot that are time specific. So now, let's talk about Purim. Ellen and Leslie, you're the rabbis in the room, and Jamie, you're the rabbis. And you're deliberating whether women should have the obligations that men have on Purim. And those obligations are listening to the Megillah, hearing the Megillah, right? Giving mishloach manot, giving something that shows care and relationship to another person, having the Su'udah, and giving charity to very poor people. So we have 4 mitzvot. Now you're sitting in the Bet Midrash. It's a big rabbinic gathering. And what would your vote be, Ellen? Would your vote be that women should be obligated in these or not, and why?
I would say yes, obligated.
Mm-hmm.
And why? And why? To celebrate what the story of Esther, to celebrate what she sacrificed.
Excellent. So you would say you would say because of Esther, who's a lady, right?
Mm-hmm.
Women have a particular investment in this holiday and all its mitzvot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because without Esther, nothing would have happened.
Correct.
Excellent. Leslie, what do you say?
Okay, so we know the answer. We know that we're obligated, but I'm trying to picture a woman with 10 children, little ones. How could she possibly be obligated to get out and hear a Megillah? Who's going to watch the kids? I mean, everything else I could see I could manage, but that seems to be a hard burden.
Excellent, 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 excellent. So the two of you are going to say that women are obligated, right? You're going to have a consideration, Leslie, and you're going to say, okay, obligated, but 1 second, we have to be practical here. So we're going to get to your practical point in a few minutes. But would we say, Leslie, would you agree that women should be obligated as well or not?
I would agree, but I feel like I'm cheating because I know that we are. Aren't we?
We are, yeah, we are. But to your point, what if a lady can't get out of the house because she has 10 kids? Can she skip the Megillah or not? Or can she read it herself? So we're going to talk about that. So we say that as a general rule, time-bound mitzvot, women are exempted from. But as it turns out, when you backfill, you end up seeing that a lot of the time-bound mitzvot, women are actually obligated to. So we have a general rule that women would not be obligated. But then, as Ellen mentioned, generally speaking, when these miraculous things happen, women were a big force in that thing. And therefore, if the women made it happen, if it was Esther in the context of Purim, and it was Yehudit in the context of Hanukkah, and it was Nashim Tzadkaniyot in the context of the righteous women in the context of Pesach, how are you going to tell me that if it happened because of the actions of a woman, the women are not going to partake in it and relive it? Of course they're going to relive it. Now, Leslie, your point, hold on to it for a few minutes because we're going to deal with it. So
Okay.
what we say is that Af hen hayu be'oto hanes, meaning the women brought the miracle on. And because the women brought the miracle on, then of course they're going to be included. Of course they can't be left out. So we end up that they are included. But now you go back to Leslie's group of rabbis who's sitting in the room who say, okay, gentlemen, but we got to be a little practical here. Remember Devorah over there with her 10 kids. What are you talking about? So now the rabbis, so to speak, go into a deliberation. And they say, well, let's see. Because we have the the general principle that women are not obligated in something time-bound, is the woman's obligation on the same level of the man's, or is it on a lesser level? And Leslie, we're going to your point. We just need a few steps to get there. Would you say that the woman, because women are typically exempt from time-bound, even though they're not going to be exempt because they were massively instrumental in making this happen, is their involvement on the same level of a man?
I guess not.
No,
Huh?
no.
Jamie says no. Leslie, you say no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if it's not on the same level of a man, it means if a man can't read the Megillah because he doesn't know how, his wife can't read it for him. Does that sound right?
Is that what you're saying?
Well, you just said it. I didn't say it. If we're saying that the lady doesn't have the same obligation, then according to the halachic, the Jewish law formula, if somebody has a lesser obligation, they can't help me fulfill my obligation.
No, I don't agree with that.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so you want to say what? Tell me it in 2 sentences. That women have the same obligation?
Oh God, I don't know.
All right, you said you said you're good with dealing with these pressures, challenges. Go. What do you say?
I
Are
say
women
that
obligated on the same level? Yes or
I'm
no?
just saying what sounds like it makes sense. So to me, it sounds like it makes sense if a woman is able to read it for her husband and he is not able, she should be able to do that.
Despite the general halachic criteria that says if someone has a lesser obligation, they can't help me fulfill mine.
But it's not a prohibition, it's just a lesser obligation.
Excellent. So are you holding that the women have a lesser obligation
Mm.
or they have the same level obligation?
An obligation is an obligation. There's no lesser or more. It's an
Right.
obligation.
So they're very nice. So Jamie is saying that an obligation is an obligation. There's no lesser or more. The truth is that there are a number of rabbis who hold, in this case, that because of the women's general obligations, her obligation in the mitzvot of Purim is a little bit lower. For example, and because it's a little bit lower, she can't read the Megillah for her husband. Maimonides, Rabbeinu Yosef Karo, the Shulchan Aruch, and the ultimate authorities that we go by say, Leslie, like you're saying, it's true, we want to consider the overall responsibilities and the day-to-day challenges of a woman, which are more demanding than a man. And we also want to consider the fact that the women are on a higher level. And we also want to consider the fact, on the other hand, that the women were integral to this. Therefore, Maimonides, Harambam, who's a massive force in Jewish halacha, says that the obligation of the lady is no less than the man. It's exactly the same. So, Ellen, if the obligation of the lady is on the same exact level as the man, can the lady read it for the man?
Yeah.
The answer is yes. Beautiful. So what would the lady do? She would say the berachot, right?
Mm.
She'd say the berachot herself. Would say the berachot, open up the Megillah, read it from end to end, and knowing she has her husband in mind, or whoever the person is with her, a bunch of men in mind, and as a result of her reading it, she is enabling them to fulfill the mitzvah. The same way when the Chazan stands in shul and reads it, he's enabling everybody to fulfill the mitzvah. Yeah?
Yep.
So we're
I have a
gonna give you-
question.
Yeah.
I have a question. What if the man and the woman don't know how to read it and the woman can't leave her house?
Okay. So the woman and the man don't know how to read it.
You bring someone in.
Oh, yes. So we'll bring somebody in. A lot of these rabbis go door to door on Purim. There are people who read it 10 times. And if you know of anybody who would be helped by that, don't hesitate. I could make an introduction. There are a number of these rabbis who go from door to door, so to speak. and they'll go and read it for people in their homes. For example, Leslie, if your mom is not feeling good and you want her to hear it, if there's a consideration for that, then, we'll arrange for someone to come to the house.
Right. My nephew Jojo Zakai reads it for everybody if
Oh.
you need anybody also.
Okay, so you have that set up. Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, very good. So if somebody can't leave the house, we bring somebody to the house. So what did we establish so far?
But it could be a girl coming to read for the two of them?
It could be a woman coming to read for the two of them, exactly. Right? So now what do we hold? That it could be a woman coming to read for the two of them. Now, could it be a kid under the age of 13, a boy under the age of 13
No.
coming to read for the two of them? No, why not? Why not?
I don't know.
What would you say based on the reasoning that we developed so far?
He doesn't have an obligation.
He doesn't have any obligation.
Mm.
So if the child under the age, the boy under the age of 13, good job, honey. If the boy under the age of 13 has no obligation, he can't read for somebody who has a 100% obligation. He can't carry me. He can't carry me. I have to carry me. Good. Okay, so far? So far we've established that despite the fact that the 4 core mitzvot of Purim are all time specific, women are obligated fully because they were majorly instrumental to the miracle. And if the point of the holiday is to continue to grow and to refine ourselves and to build ourselves to the next level, we certainly need the women doing that, because the same way they led the redemption in the 3 key times so far out of Egypt, in the case of the Megillat Esther, Megillat Ruth and Megillat Esther, they will do so in the future in terms of the ultimate redemption with the Mashiach. So women are obligated.
Women didn't really have so much to do in Hanukkah, they did.
Hanukkah they did, because Yehudit killed the general. Yeah, that was a very big thing. And they say that the rebellion started with the poor farmers in the fields and the women. They it wasn't Yehuda Maccabee, Hashmonaim, that came later. Okay, great. So why don't we have a woman stand up in the synagogue and read for everybody?
I don't know.
That's just singing.
Kol Isha would be singing. Why don't we do it? Now we established in our Beit Midrash that the women are on the same level of the men in this respect. They have the same obligation and the same opportunity, and they have the ability to read for their husbands, or whatever it might be. They have.
You want
Yeah,
a black hat answer?
yeah.
Not modest.
It's not modest, and that's exactly the answer that we take on. That's exactly, and you know why? I'll tell you why. Because men will be men will be men.
Wow.
That's the reality. Men are just men, and they just, there's sounds cliched and silly, but there's very hard to change a man, and therefore there's a sensitivity to sniut, to issues of modesty, and not because there's anything fundamentally wrong with the woman reading for the man, but the idea that the man is not going to focus properly. Okay, good. Now, what mitzvah is tethered to Kriyat Megillah? We have 4 mitzvot total on the holiday. 2 are connected and the other 2 are connected. So what mitzvah is connected to the reading of the Megillah?
The Mishloach Manot?
No.
No.
What's the other one?
The meal.
The matanot, yeah. And what's the other mitzvah?
The meal.
Right, we have the meal.
Seudah.
Yeah.
What's the 4th one?
Giving to the poor.
Exactly. Excellent. So it's giving to the Evyon, right? Who is an Evyon? An Evyon, lo alenu, is a person who is very, very poor, a person who literally may not have something to eat. So that's why we say on Purim, the mitzvah of matanot evyonim is outside of the general mitzvah of giving 10% of a person's net income. It's outside of that because that a person does anyway as an obligation. But over here on Purim, you're not allowed to turn down anybody. It's a separate mitzvah. And the evyon, and there's the difference between the word evyon, which is a destitute person, where the mitzvah is focused on Purim, and an ani, who's a poor person who qualifies for charity. In terms of the evyon, we never turn anybody away.
That has to do with the Megillah reading?
That has to do with the Megillah reading. Why? Why would that have to do with the Megillah reading? That is tethered to the Megillah reading.
They're both obligations.
All right, but you have two other obligations as well. You have the meal, as you said, and you have the mishloach manot. So why are these two tied together?
Morality, like?
Morality, but more than that, on a very practical level, on a simple practical level, why are these mitzvot tied together? Reading the Megillah, and you know what? Let's add one piece there. The best way to read the Megillah is how?
Out loud.
Out loud, of course. But what's the best way to do it? It's called Pirsumei Nisa, right? We want to publicize the miracle, and therefore we do it in a large setting. We try to do it in as large a setting as possible, as many people as possible. Again, health and everything else permitting. So now that we know that we have an obligation, everybody, men and women, to read the Megillah, and we know that one of the points of reading the Megillah is to let the word out to as many people as possible on this great miracle that happened.
The poor people are gonna be there.
That's right. The poor people are
Oh,
going.
Jamie, that was good.
Face us.
That's because she's shuffling the deck as she's listening.
Sitting on the card table.
Yeah. And the poor people are going to be there. And that's one of the reasons that we will never read the Megillah on Shabbat. The other reason is they're afraid that people are going to carry it in a place without an Eruv. But one of the other reasons we'll never read the Megillah on a Shabbat, and the calendar has been set so that doesn't happen, other than in Jerusalem this year, which if we have a minute, we'll talk about it. We never read on Shabbat because if we read on Shabbat, the chances of this very poor person getting the money he or she needs are greatly diminished, because the time when everybody is getting together for the reading of the Megillah is a time when they can't give charity. So we, in the olden days, 2,000 years ago, they would literally move the day of Purim. If Purim fell on a Friday, for example, let's say Purim fell on a Wednesday, they would move Purim back to Monday, because Monday was the day of the market, and that was the day when most people gathered together. And not Purim, they would move the reading of the Megillah back to Monday, because that was the market day. So we're going to bring it all together. We're going to bring the villagers and the city people all together on the big commerce day of the week. So that way we get the most exposure to the reading of the Megillah and the proclamation of the miracle that happened and is happening. And we give the best opportunity for the destitute people to collect. So for our purposes today, men, women, when you go to here, you should take a wad of singles and try not to ignore anybody. We don't judge anybody on Purim. Anybody who puts his hand out, we accept it. So it's a good idea to prepare for it and to try to have, whatever amount of money a person is prepared to give, put it in denominations where you can give to an unexpectedly large number of people who ask, because the
Does
Evyon,
that include non-Jews?
it does not include non-Jews, no.
Okay, so you could pass a non-Jewish beggar on the street.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, 100%, yeah. I mean, sometimes we do it for Dakei Shalom, for peace and like that, but it's absolutely not included here. So we always tether the Megillah reading to Matanot Evyonim, to giving charity to the very poor people. They're tied together, and men and women have the same exact level of obligation. Therefore, if a man told a lady to please go ahead and take care of all the Evyonim she sees on her behalf and his, that would be okay, because she has the same obligation that he does. Great. The other two mitzvot are also tied together. The other two mitzvot are the Seudat Purim and the Mishloach Manot. So what is the Seudat Purim? What is the Purim meal? What's the point of that?
No, we commemorate all great things with a feast.
Yeah, that's right. We do. We actually do. We commemorate good things, all things, with a meal. In this case, it's we're taking a shot at the meal that Hashverosh, the meal, so to speak, that Hashverosh had. We talked about it. It was 180 days, then the 7 days. Was it an actual meal or not an actual meal? Let's assume it was. And in his meal, whether it was an overarching indoctrination of the people to move away from spirituality and things related to a greater good, or it was an actual meal that tried to do the same thing, we have our meal based in spirituality. We sing, we drink wine. Wine enables a person, I don't know if it still does, but it did in past times, to be expansive about his or her deep felt ideas, to open up, to be able to articulate things better. And so the meal is incumbent on the women as well to enjoy it, to participate. Ideally, we wash for that meal. Happens to be that this year Purim falls on a Friday, which means that the meal is done before Chatzot, before about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We try to do it as early as possible so we don't take away from our appetites for Shabbat. So we try to do it in the morning, which means it sort of squishes the day down in terms of the overall hours to do Mishloach Manot and hear the Megillah and so on. So everybody's obligated to the meal as well, correct? Men and women?
Yes.
Great. Now, what is the Mishloach Manot? We said that the Mishloach Manot and the meal are sister mitzvot. What is the Mishloach Manot?
You should give mishloach manot pertaining to the meal.
So the Mishloach Manot must be pertaining to the meal. They must be pertaining to the meal. They must be something that can be eaten at the meal, right? Including dessert.
Muffins are important.
Including dessert. But I remember one year we sent out dairy. I don't know, doing something.
Did we?
I'm so dumb. Yeah, I was
No.
completely off. Maybe we talked about it. I don't know. But
Just one item to two people. Or one
so
item.
it could be two different items. Could be two different items, or it could be two portions of one item. The Shulchan Aruch says sort of implies both. It could be two different items, or it could be two portions of one item.
So that's not two different berachot, which we always
doesn't
thought
have
it
to-
was.
I always thought it was two, but I'm.
It doesn't
Right,
have
we
to
always
be.
thought that.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. It could be. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. But what is critical is as follows. Everybody, men and women, are obligated to one Mishloach Manot. Everything we do beyond the one is totally extra. It's nice, but it's not obligated.
So why do you think it was two?
No, it's one tray. It's one gift,
We
right?
don't have to give two different mishloachs?
No, you have to give to two different very poor people, lo aleinu, but we have to give one mishloach. Mishloach manot ish l'rehu. I'm going to send something from one person to my friend. So men and women are obligated. The language says ish, which means man, but we talked about that, and we know that on Purim, despite the fact that all these mitzvot are time specific, whatever the guy has to do, the lady has to do. Now, how do we effectuate it? We have to do at least one sort of special one that reflects a different level of care and thought. If we're sending out several of them, which generally speaking we do in the community, then the several could be whatever they are, whatever they are. It's just an extra. It's not a mitzvah. It's not anything. It's just a nice gesture. But the primary one is meant to build a relationship, to enrich a relationship, to express care. It's very important to do everything we can to identify a person. It could be a dear person who we want to make it more dear, or it could be a distant person that we want to bring close. We do whatever we can to identify someone whom, based on our outreach, we can grow the relationship or deepen the relationship. That's the purpose of it. And it's meant to blunt when Haman tells Ahashverosh, Yesh am mefuzar mefurad ben ha'amim. There's a nation that's spread out, which is no big deal. Spread out is one thing. It's fine. 127 city-states. The Jews are spread out in all his little countries. But to say that they're separate and spread out, what Haman was saying was there was distance, there was dysfunction, there was a lack of unity. So when we give the Mishloach Manot, we're working to blunt that. We could be spread out, we can be very different places, but we need to be building relationships on this holiday. So, for example, there's stories in the Talmud about a rabbi who was very wealthy, sent another rabbi, his friend, Mishloach Manot, and the one who received it sent the messenger back to the sender and said, what do you call that? Was that matanot levyonim? Was that crummy gift a piece of charity for a poor guy? I.e., he didn't fulfill, the rich guy who was giving it, didn't fulfill his obligation, which is to recognize his station and the person's station and situation, and the demands that he acknowledge that, and he sends something on an appropriate level. And so it's reflective of the sender. And again, we're talking about one basket or one package or one whatever it is. After that, everything else is whatever you want to do. It doesn't mean anything. So it has to reflect the person's station, and it has to reflect care and thought. Good? Now, does it have to be food or drink?
I would think yes. You make a beracha, no?
Okay, good. So why does it have to be food and drink? Because it's tied to the seudah. It's tied to the meal. And it's meant to be eaten at the meal. And therefore, it has to be food or drink. Now, can someone send raw meat that needs to be cooked? The answer is shouldn't. Some rabbis say that you can, but the answer is preferably not to. You certainly can't send what they might do in the old days, a chicken that has to be slaughtered or an animal that has to be slaughtered, because that's too much work, too many steps. But there are rabbis who say if the meat is raw and wouldn't take too much of a burden to be cooked, yeah, you could send that. But generally speaking, we don't. Generally speaking, we send something that can go right up on the table. That's the thing. So candy, not a great idea. We can't send, we can't send a book, a Torah book. We can't send, you know, we can't send a beautiful piece of cloth or something like that. Again, that can be sent to person number 2, 3, 4, 10, but it can't be sent as that primary one. So the primary one is something that the woman is incumbent to do as well. It should be something special to that one person. It should reflect a thoughtful consideration. It should be something that can be eaten on the meal, either 2 pieces of one item with the same beracha or 2 different berachot. Either way is fine. And that's the connection over there. So we have the matanot le'evyonim, the gift to the poor people is tied to the Megillah reading, because that's when the poor people are going to be around. And the mishloach manot is tied to the meal. Okay, so far?
Good.
Okay, we'll go a couple more minutes.
Mhm.
Okay, great. So what is the issue of simcha on this holiday? Let's wrap it up at this point of happiness. A person is meant to have a great time on this holiday. What's that about?
On a practical level, the people were celebrating after they averted their death.
Right, exactly. They were celebrating, and what does that mean for us? What if a person is not particularly happy at that point for whatever reason?
No, we're celebrating the existence of Judaism, not personal accomplishment.
Excellent. So what's the person's obligation then?
To be happy that we're still a nation and we're still alive.
Excellent. So then the person has to prepare for the holiday, right? He has to prepare himself or herself, whatever it might be, to clear his head or whatever of things that are difficult. And this is something that I certainly, I know I have to remind myself of, that, we have to think about the pressures that come. We have to think about the issues, and we have to put ourselves in a good state of mind. For me personally, one of the things that does that is putting on the clown costume or something like that. Because when I put on a clown costume, I'm not Ricky Cohen anymore. I don't have to be so heavy and serious, right? I'm a clown, and that's it. And nobody's going to take that away from me, at least for these handful of hours. And that's a very big deal. So that's why I'm a very big fan of costumes. In our Seudot, everybody comes with a costume from all ages. Everybody comes with a costume. And it's fun. It's a treat. It's a laugh when everybody walks in and they surprise everybody else. So whatever it might be, whether it's a silly thing like that, or it's a more mindful thing of a level of preparation, this is a day where everybody should really be enjoying. And you see it, you see these guys going through the streets with the trucks, with music, dragging people out of their homes, because this is a day of sort of unbridled happiness, of just fun. And we should find ourselves in that mindset and in that circumstance if we can. If you're still going to be in Florida and Mexico, I'm sure the Chabadnikim will be having a ball on this holiday, right?
For sure, but I'll be in Mexico City that day.
Ah, okay. There's a lot over there too, I would imagine.
Yes, we're gonna have fun.
Good. Thoughts? Any thoughts?
No, I'm just thinking personally,
Mhm.
I have so much on my plate, it's very hard because I am working that day as well.
Mhm.
And I'm making a seudah, and I have to hear the Megillah. So it's like, just stressful to put yourself in that frame because it's just logistically hard and you have to, make it
It's
work.
hard. Yeah, it's hard. You're working that day? Yeah, on Purim Day,
On
Friday?
Purim Day.
Wow. People have events the next day or
They
something?
have, yeah, the next day events.
Wow.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Wow, beautiful.
So you have to hear the Megillah early
Have to hear the Megillah, make a seudah, and work. And be happy.
and have a great time. Well, stop by where we're doing our thing by Bobby.
maybe.
Stop by my daughter-in-law. We'll send you the
Oh.
address. You'll see a bunch of people in funny costumes, and that'll lighten you up. We'll see.
Thank you.
Right. All right.
Thank you, Rabbi. That
All
was
right.
great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
This is
Thank
very
you so much.
enjoyable.
Bye.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it. Have a great day, everybody.
Have
Bye-bye.
a beautiful holiday.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.